Hi, I'm Ken Dail, Executive Director with Prevention Network Michigan. Prevention Network has been around for about 30 years, working throughout the state of Michigan to help community groups prevent underage drinking, youthful tobacco use, and other substance abuse. Our main goal is to work with local community groups to address local issues with local solutions. We do convene a couple statewide groups like the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking and Parenting Awareness Michigan. But even those events, those activities are really focused on helping you at the local level come up with local solutions with local problems. The Prevention Showcase is a chance for Prevention Network to work with the leaders from nonprofit groups and organizations here in the capital area and throughout the state of Michigan to tell their story. We want them to be able to showcase what it is that they do best right in your neighborhoods. We hope that you enjoy the show. Today we'll talk with Lindsay Felsing, who's the Director of Economic Security at Elder Law of Michigan Incorporated. Can you tell me a little bit about Elder Law and some of the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we often hear when people say elder law is they think that we are a law firm. That started because 23 years ago, it's kind of a running joke that we were 3 lawyers in a phone booth running a legal hotline for Michigan seniors. So since then, we've expanded to meet a variety of needs for older adults in Michigan, but the name Elder Law of Michigan is still with us.
Sure. So was there a Mr. Elder in the beginning, one of the 3 lawyers? Or?
Nope, no Mr. Elder.
So it really does just kind of represent the clients that you work with.
Yep. And since then we've evolved to do a lot of work with a variety of vulnerable adults, not just typically what you would think of as seniors.
Okay.
So we try to help people solve problems and meet basic needs.
Okay. Now, what are some of the type services, or what does kind of the typical phone call deal with at Elder Law?
So as people age into poverty, which a lot of our clients do, they're asking for help for the very first time. So that means they do not know where to begin, and many are isolated with few social supports that might tell them where to begin. So really, it's when we tell people to make that one call for help to Elder Law of Michigan, they really are making a call kind of, I don't know where to begin, what do I even do? So we can give them a place to start. So we would never say, memorize what all of our different programs are. We want to make sure we're helping vulnerable adults in Michigan by promoting and protecting their rights, health, and economic well-being.
Sure. Now you said as adults age into poverty. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that? That's kind of a new concept for me.
Okay. So it really means age into poverty. So they are no longer working and they're living on a fixed income of Social Security, for example. And they have a limited amount of assets that they're now having to use to live on. So poverty might not have been an issue before when they were working, but now that they have aged into this fixed income situation, it really is. And as we age, we're also facing increased medical expenses, and we're might be trying to pay for a home that is a little bit more difficult to pay for. I think it's a misconception that older adults in Michigan live in a home that's been paid for. Right. So housing costs can still be very high for seniors in Michigan. Other common calls that we get, people need access to benefits, things like food assistance, and that's a program that there's very low rates of participation for seniors, something like 38%. So there's this huge group of seniors in Michigan that should be accessing this benefit to help put food on the table that are not. So we hope we can, through some of our work, bridge that gap and make sure people know to call us when they need help.
Sure, yeah, so it's not a matter, we're not talking about adults who have made risky investments or made bad decisions or blew their money gambling or whatever some of those stereotypes might be. These are just folks that have seen a reduction in their income because of retirement or whatever, but their expenses have either stayed the same or gone up, that kind of setup.
Right. It could actually maybe be both of those situations. So certainly our average call is more about someone trying to make ends meet, put food on the table, stay in their home. But certainly if someone did make some of those other bad decisions, they could call our legal hotline as well.
Right.
So
You'd still work with them.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, in order to I guess not even provide these services, but in order to point vulnerable adults in the right direction, you got to have a pretty good idea of the resources that are out there, not only federal and state resources, but what's going on in different corners of the state.
Locally as well, yep. So since we're housed here in Lansing, most of our programs serve the entire state of Michigan.
Okay.
So we do absolutely have to know what's happening federally, statewide, and locally. And we do that by partnering with a lot of organizations in different counties throughout Michigan, and having volunteers that are also located throughout the state. Volunteers are pretty important to our work.
All right. So how did you come into this work? What drew you to elder law, or what drew you to kind of helping people or vulnerable adults in the first place?
Well, I am a social worker. Was kind of born with that social worker gene. So after I graduated from grad school, Elder Law of Michigan had a job listing, and that was the first thing that I wanted to apply for. I felt really strongly about the work that they were doing, and wanted to be a part of it.
Oh, great. So it was just a good fit when you graduated.
Yep,
Wow, that's
absolutely.
Great, 'cause those don't always happen.
Yeah.
So that's fabulous. How long have you been there?
Since January 2011.
Okay,
so fresh out of grad school, and
Yeah.
I've been.
Just a couple of years, huh?
Yep.
Well, that's great. So the folks that you work with, you mentioned other vulnerable adults. It's not just elders anymore. What are some things? Are we talking adults with disabilities, or what exactly is other vulnerable adults?
So. Since we have evolved to make sure we're meeting the needs that are current with the times, we have found that housing is really an issue for a lot of not just older adults, but adults in Michigan. So we want to help meet those needs for adults in Michigan. So some of our housing counseling programs don't have an age limit, for example. And you'll find in so many different programs people use different terms to talk about what it means to be a senior. So we try to get rid of some of those and just make sure we're helping adults in Michigan make ends meet, solve problems, have access to safe and affordable housing. And they can do that through our one call for help.
Okay, so it really isn't limited to kind of disabled adults or elderly or anything. It's any adult that really needs help can at least start with a call to elder law.
Right, and some of our programs do have age limits, specifics on them, but not all of them do. And certainly if someone calls us, we will point them in the right direction, whether it's us helping them or finding the place that will.
Yeah, so it really is. I mean, you had mentioned kind of the one call, what was it that you said earlier?
The one call for help?
Yeah, the one call for help. I mean, it really is. Even, again, if it's not you that's doing it, you can point people to where they can get those resources.
Absolutely.
That's a great resource for people to have. You mentioned housing. You kind of mentioned income. What are some other kind of big challenges that people face before they call elder law? What are people dealing with?
It can be as simple as putting food on the table. Do I purchase my prescriptions, or do I buy myself a meal? That's something we hear about all of the time. Finding safe and affordable housing, paying for utilities, paying for prescriptions, covering medical costs, all of those things. Questions about insurance, Medicare, so a really wide range of needs are out there, so we work to help them solve a lot of different problems.
Yeah, so there's not a typical call. It really is when the phone rings, you really don't know what you're going to be dealing with in the next 5 minutes.
Right, absolutely. It can be such a wide range of things because we face so many different issues. But if I had to nail it down to one call, it's food or financial assistance.
Yeah, you hear a lot of that. Yeah. Now, you'd mentioned volunteers earlier. how just right here in your Lansing office, how many volunteers do you work with, and what kind of work do those volunteers do?
So volunteers are super important to us. Like I mentioned earlier, we do work across the state. So we have over 120 volunteers in the community helping older adults apply for benefits like food and medical assistance. We also have volunteers in our office that do everything from stuffing envelopes to calling legislators to advocate for the rights of older adults in Michigan. So they do so much work for us. We also have a lot of volunteer attorneys that do work on our legal hotline to provide free legal advice to Michigan seniors. So super big part of our organization.
Right. Now the volunteers that you have locally, are these people who are they just volunteering kind of out of their homes? Are these people with special expertise, or are these people who work within an agency usually that has some expertise in that area, and their employers are kind of allowing them to do that to be a resource to you?
All of the above.
Okay.
The 120 volunteers that I have mentioned spread throughout the state often help older adults apply for benefits through their work at another agency in the community. Some do it as volunteers, volunteering at those other agencies,
Really?
But we provide training and support to them.
Okay.
Then I mentioned that we have volunteer attorneys, so they have the legal expertise. Right. Then we also work with the retired senior volunteer program.
Okay.
And seniors come in and volunteer for us, or volunteer to help other seniors apply for benefits. So we really engage with volunteers in a lot of different ways. And we actually, if you get our one call for help number 866-400-9164, people interested in volunteering can dial extension 500.
They can call there too.
Yep, and we have a lot of opportunities, and also work with interns, a lot of social work interns who want to help in the community as well.
Wow, there's a lot going on over there.
Yeah, there is.
Jeez. Now, how is it that you had mentioned kind of the 3 attorneys 23 years ago in a phone booth?
Yep.
How did they decide, were they all kind of, did they have personal experiences where they had parents or loved ones who were having issues, or did they just kind of decide over a game of golf, hey, this service is not being provided and we think that we can do a pretty good job of doing it? How did that happen?
Well, all I know is the legends of what happened,
Sure.
I suppose.
Yeah.
One of those 3 attorneys is still with us at Elder Law of Michigan, and I know that he felt that serving older adults was super important to the well-being of our communities, and saw it as an area where there were not a lot of services available, and knew that people needed a place to turn. So I'm pretty sure that's where it all came about.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily one specific thing. It was just kind of a looking around and saying, here's a service that it seems like somebody needs to provide, and I seem like one of the people that can do it.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's great. And that person is one of those original 3 is still working with Elder Law.
Yep, he's retiring soon.
Yeah.
But and definitely going to miss hearing him on calls. Just a wealth of information.
Oh, I bet.
So.
Yeah, I bet. When you're the one that kind of helps create the idea in the first place, and then live 23 years of providing that service, I would imagine, wow, that's a lot of stuff for that person to kind of have bouncing around. So, funding-wise, I mean, do you work contracts? Do you work, who pays the bills? Because with that many services going on, there's got to be a lot of infrastructure costs, staff and rent, and somebody's got to pay for the toll-free number. So
right, and I think like many nonprofits in the community, we experience the demand for our services will always exceed the resources we have available. So I think anyone that works at a nonprofit can relate to that. You need to serve more people with less, but we are lucky enough to have some good funding in place, state and federal funding. Michigan Department of Human Services, Michigan of Offices to Services to the Aging, also some private foundations and private donations.
So kind of the same, basically, when it comes to nonprofits in Lansing, kind of the same funding shuffle that we all deal with.
Yep.
A little bit of state, a little bit of foundation, a little bit of fundraising.
Exactly.
Do you do fundraising events? Is there an Elder Law golf outing? Is there?
We have a yearly Call to Justice event that takes place. We had 2 this year, and people that serve seniors in Michigan tend to attend the event and can make donations at that time.
So is it a big dinner or an auction or a party, or what do you?
It was a lunch and a breakfast this year. We had a dinner last year.
Oh, great. Well, that sounds good. So what else, if the bills are all paid, and as you kind of already indicated, yeah, like that'll ever happen, because there's always more services and more people who need services than what there are resources for. But other than the funding issue, what kind of challenges do you all face over there?
Well, I think that the challenges is just helping people make ends meet. 8 out of 10 of our clients are low income, 90% are over 60, and about 60% live at 100% of poverty. So that means they're trying to figure out how to make ends meet with less than $918 a month.
Wow.
So you take that amount, take away, housing costs, high medical expenses. There's often not a lot left over for food. So it's hard to hear those situations, and we work hard to make sure we can find people answers. But I think that's an everyday challenge is how do we help this person?
Right. And I know I'll kind of be putting you on the spot, and it's really difficult to know without the whole situation, but how do you help those people? I mean, what do you tell someone who calls from, some county in northern Michigan and says, just what you just said, I can either go grocery shopping or I can pay for my heart medication.
Right.
What can you do for me?
I think a good place to start, one service we provide is benefit screenings. Excuse me. So based on their situation, we can give them an idea of what they're likely eligible for, and often help them take the next step to apply for that assistance. So we try to kind of say, based on your situation, here's what you might be eligible for, here's how we can help you apply, and take those next steps, and hopefully relieve some of the anxiety that can come with being in that situation.
Right. Do you find that a lot of folks who call you aren't taking advantage of all the assistance that they can?
Yes, only because they don't know what's available to them.
Really?
Yeah, many people, and I think this is why there's such low rates of people accessing the State of Michigan Food Assistance Program that provides money to pay for food. They've never heard of it. They think they won't qualify because they receive Social Security, even if it's a very small, social amount each month.
Right.
Things like that. They've never heard of it, or they think they won't be eligible for it.
Right. Now, you'd mentioned advocacy earlier. Is that any of the kind of advocacy you're doing? It seems to me as not an easy solution, but one solution would be, how do we promote this better and how do we educate the public better? Is that something that there's any kind of push or any move within the state of Michigan to do a better job of informing the citizens?
Absolutely. I think a big part of the work that we do is outreach. People won't know to make that one call for help if they've never heard of us.
Right.
And you go to places all the time and people haven't heard of us. So we do presentations in the community. We work with a lot of senior housing buildings to do presentations to their residents, senior centers, departments on aging, area agencies on aging. So we do a lot of outreach and engagement with the community that way. But then of course we also do advocacy on a broader level to make sure we're telling legislators what's important for older adults in Michigan, and to not cut programs that help them.
Right, yeah. So a lot of that promotion is really coming through elder law. I mean, you're probably one of the biggest commercials or one of the biggest promoters of the state services that are out there.
We try to be, and of course we can't do it without all of our community partners that really help us do all the work, because we're one small nonprofit in Lansing, and our relationships across the state are what really makes that aging network help older adults in Michigan.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned earlier, and I guess I should ask how else you use this, but what kind of technology, what kind of web services or social media or whatever, how is elder law using kind of emerging technologies to both assist elderly adults or vulnerable adults and get the word out that you're there as a resource?
Well, we do the standard, social networking via our Facebook page, and we also use technology via our website so that people throughout the state of Michigan can use an interactive map to find one of our community partners where they can access people we have trained to help them apply for benefits right at a place in their community. So that's how we can kind of do all of this localized work from being in Lansing. So those are just a few ways that we connect to people using technology.
Sure. Have you done any I don't know, kind of information gathering or studying? A lot of people have a view of who uses Facebook and who uses Twitter and who's texting and some things like that. Is that a viable way to reach kind of specifically an elderly population? Are they on Facebook? Do they know Twitter? Are they on Facebook, web pages?
I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the most common Facebook user is a woman in her 50s.
Really?
So maybe in 5 years, the 60 and over crowd will really be on Facebook. I think you see that more and more. But I think that family members and caregivers of older adults absolutely use Facebook and the internet, and sometimes they're the person that's calling us on behalf of their family member. So certainly it's a good way to reach people like that in multi-generational homes. Currently, one way to apply for benefits through the state of Michigan is an online application called My Bridges. That's a wonderful system, but certainly one that a lot of isolated people in their late 70s won't access because they don't have internet or they don't know how to use a computer. So that's another way we can help them through applying for benefits through a way that makes sense for them, as in a world that has technology moving so quickly and advancing so quickly all the time.
Yeah, it sure is. You had mentioned family members and caregivers. Do you get a pretty fair amount of calls from not the elderly or vulnerable adult themselves, but a family member or someone who cares?
Oh yes, absolutely. We just have to get consent from the person that we can talk to their family member or caregiver on their behalf. But yes, absolutely.
Sure. Now you've worked, you had mentioned, probably not a fair question for you if you've only worked at elder law, but as you look around, you certainly interact with a lot of other nonprofits. What kind of challenges are you seeing with other agencies, other nonprofit agencies, kind of not only your partner agencies but beyond? Where do you see the nonprofit field right now?
I think we're all kind of, like we discussed earlier, facing the same challenge that times are hard for a lot of people, especially the clients that we serve. And funding is also, trying to meet all of those needs with limited resources is a challenge. So there's always that we have to do more with less. But from the people I know that work at other nonprofits and my interaction with other nonprofits, I think we're all lucky to be working at places where people are truly dedicated to still working, as hard as we can to make sure we can help meet those needs. So.
So it sounds like kind of the same things that elder law is facing, same things with Prevention Network. It comes down to resources and the need for the services that we're providing. So within nonprofits, and I guess being a kind of an up-and-coming person at elder law, someone who hopefully will be there for a while and in the future could play a very prominent role in management and agency decisions. There's kind of two camps when it comes to nonprofits. We're all mission-driven. We all have a mission that's our goal and our focus every day when we come to work is to work towards that mission. But there's some nonprofits that say, well, geez, our mission isn't fitting the current funding structure, or the federal government isn't paying for what we're doing, or the foundations have lost interest in what our mission is, so we need to change our mission. We need to become something entirely different to follow the funds. And then there's kind of the other camp who says, no, our mission is our mission. What we do is what we do. And if there's no funding for it, then either we start volunteering or we fold up and go home and quit working. Where would you see yourself or elder law kind of as an extension? Where would you see yourself in that discussion?
Well, our mission, is to promote and protect the rights, health, and economic well-being of vulnerable adults in Michigan, and I really can't see our mission changing. I can see us evolving to meet the needs of the time, because I think those can change for people depending on what's going on in the world, certainly. But I see us staying really true to that mission, and I think we have for 23 years.
Right. So that's where you think you're headed in the future as well. Yeah. Well, if you could kind of look down the road a little ways, just think 5 years into the future, where would you see elder law, and what would you like to see going on at elder law in the next 5 years?
Well, like I said, I think that we have done a good job of evolving to meet the needs of the time, and most recently it's this doing a lot more housing counseling, because housing costs are a lot higher for older adults than you would think.
Okay.
Tax foreclosure is another big issue.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we've done a good job of meeting that need that has come up in the last couple years. So I hope that we continue to see what issues older adults are facing and make sure we have programming that addresses those issues.
Okay, so making sure you're keeping up with whatever the needs are in the next few years. So what if you could look, and you might be able to do this, because you're at the beginning of the career, what if you look way out into the future, 50 years from now? What do you think are some of the things that elder law is going to be facing with that batch of vulnerable adults who are needing services in 50 years? What's that going to look like?
Well, in 50 years, I'll probably be calling Elder Law of Michigan. But, that's a hard one. Certainly I know that they'll be there and doing the work. And if I have to use them, I feel lucky to know everything that they do. But I think the world, it seems, and this is kind of a personal thought, is changing so quickly all of the time. There's a new set of issues, I think, that comes with all of those changes. So I don't think that will go away in the future. So I think making sure older adults know what's going on when the world is changing so fast and they're used to things being a certain way.
Right.
I just hope we continue to help people in that way.
Yeah. If you had to guess, based on it, not necessarily 50 years into the future, but based on what you're seeing right now, the calls that you're getting, are there some trends that you're seeing? I know that you mentioned kind of housing costs seems to be a consistent issue, this choice that seniors have to make with limited incomes of what's more important. But are there any, a lot's going on with healthcare right now.
Yeah.
There's specifically with vulnerable adults, we have a lot of returning vets who are facing issues that, things like traumatic brain injuries and things like that, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we just weren't looking at. What are some trends that you're seeing or that elder law is kind of paying attention to that you're thinking, geez, 15 years from now, we're really going to get hit with whatever? What would that whatever be?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And certainly, like I mentioned, the housing counseling tends to be the trend right now. I don't think, I hope that it changes, but it's hard for me to think that putting food on the table will stop being an issue for people.
Right.
I think that will be, present throughout time,
Right.
and getting access to healthy foods, which is, putting the right nutrition in your body as we age becomes more important than ever. Certainly, those veterans that you mentioned coming back that are young now with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries, I can only imagine what services they might need as they age. One thing that I think we don't talk about as much with the aging population that might be relevant to the work at Prevention Network is substance abuse in older adults, which I know is an increasing problem.
Sure.
So I'm sure as time goes on that will always be relevant. So I hope there's more services that address that specifically in older adults, because I don't know that they do now.
Right. No, I agree, and I don't think they do either. That is always one population that is difficult to get a grasp on. What does substance abuse look like with an elderly population? But I think it's more relevant now, and probably will be more relevant in the future as we see people lasting to 100 years old. It used to be, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, 100 years old was almost unheard of. It just really was a wow, someone lived to 100. Right. And now there's probably more 100-year-olds, than we've ever had. And that will probably continue, to be very close to that with advances in healthcare and nutrition and things that we know now that we didn't know a decade ago even. So I do think that there is going to be this interesting look at folks who are 75 and 80 who are now behaving like they're 50,
Right.
whereas before they behaved like this is the end of life for them. You know, they're slowing down, they're not getting into, you know, things that 50-year-olds normally, you know, would get into that we think of. So I think that is one of those things that in the next few years we will be taking a harder look at is, geez, we have 80-year-olds who are now acting like kids again, you know, because they are pretty confident at 80, they feel pretty good, and they're probably going to be around another at least 10, 15 years. And if they didn't kind of have their wild life earlier, you know, what better time than now? You know, the responsibilities are taken care of. So that is something that, yeah, the prevention
Right.
field has been trying to pay more attention to.
And if we are living an extra 10, 15 years, so let's say, you know, 90 is pretty long, and then it's 100, and then
Right.
110, that's even longer that we're trying to make limited financial resources
Right.
last.
Right.
So, of course, while it's great to live longer, we hope we can, I definitely see making sure that quality of life keeps
Right.
up with that longer duration.
Right.
You know, there will be a lot of services that need to address those, and
Yeah.
healthcare costs, I can
Right.
only imagine.
Right, right, no kidding. Especially as agencies, I mean, you know, there's companies as large as General Motors that are now kind of saying, wow, where are all these old people coming from who were paying their insurance? There was kind of an assumption, you know, back when my dad retired, well, he's probably only going to live another 4 or 5 years, so we don't have to plan for 30 more years of life to pay for his life insurance or his health insurance. But that's almost the norm now, is when people retire at 60, 65, you know, sorry, if you said you're going to pay for their health insurance through their life, you have another 30 years. And if you didn't bank on that, yeah, it can be pretty detrimental to any size company. So I think we are seeing more and more of that, even with the big, huge companies and the huge agencies.
Right, and I think now with younger generations, it's hard to find a job right now, so it's hard to plan for a retirement at this time for many young people. So when they do reach 60, 65, what will Medicare look like? What will their what will their retirement look like?
Yeah, things that
What
they
services will they need?
may have banked on and thought, oh, that's going to be there. Oh, geez, you know, they might not be there quite as strong. So, and I think it is more common, like you said, for people not only to find a stable job a little bit later, but I mean, you know, the chances of you staying at elder law statistically until you retire, that, you know, that's pretty slim. And you might do it. Maybe it's you know, where you will plant yourself until your retirement age. But yeah, the chances of that happening for people coming out of college right now, I mean, they're not only talking about 2 or 3 or 4 jobs, they're talking about 2 or 3 or 4 complete different fields that people will work in who are coming out of college now. So looking at that, oh my gosh, yeah, how do you plan from this field to that field to the next job to the next job for what's going to happen in retirement age? I mean, like, I'm thinking, can I hold this job, or will I get downsized by the end of the year, let alone what's going to happen to me when I'm 70?
Right.
So I think we are going to see that, you know, as you mentioned, it's like, wow, the resources that maybe my parents thought about because they thought, oh, well, we're going to work at GM for 35 years and be done. You know, we have to think a whole new way as far as, I might not work at this place, you know, for 35 years. So
Absolutely, and I think you touch on a reason why so many seniors now are isolated and have fewer community supports than they used to, because, you know, a few decades ago, people didn't have to move away to find jobs. So
Right.
you found more communities that had all of the extended family living near each other. Now people's kids, grandkids live 2 hours away.
Right.
They live in another state because they had to move to find a job, or,
Right.
or whatever you know, happened in their life. So they have fewer community support. So
Sure.
need access to resources that can help them more than ever, I think.
Yeah, I bet. Now, you mentioned the phone number.
Yes.
That's kind of the one call for help, and that number certainly is pretty prominent out there, and people know that number. How else can people interact? If a person really doesn't want to call, they just want to go to the website and get a little bit of information to see if they really are calling the right place. Is the website a good place for people to find more information?
Absolutely. The one call for help number is 866-400-9164. Our website's is certainly a good place to start as well. There, we list all of our programs and services available. People can get a lot more information about them there if they want to learn a little bit more before calling.
And you mentioned there's even that interactive map, so they might even be able to find a local resource through the portal at your website?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great resource too. If the person out there who's watching this who doesn't have time to volunteer or doesn't have the expertise but just wants to make life a little easier for elderly people on their block or in their apartment building or in their neighborhood, what are some things that they can do? What are some suggestions that you would have for the average citizen around here to just make life easier for a vulnerable adult?
Well, if someone doesn't want to volunteer, they could certainly still get some of our brochures and put them up around their community if they wanted to make sure people in their community knew that we were around to help older adults. They can refer their family members to us or just know that number if they do come across someone. And certainly donations are always accepted as well, and those can be made via our website.
Through the website, great. Kind of a selfish question, but I have retirees living all around me where I am. What can I do as just a guy living there just to make their lives a little happier and a little better?
Beyond and referring them for resources?
Yeah, if they don't need resources. If they're doing just fine, but if they're still kind of elderly. I mean, they're not able to get around as much. What can I do? Am I being too pushy if I go knock on the door and say, hey, can I bring over dinner one night a week? Or can I mow your lawn for you? Are they going to get mad, or should I do that?
I think as far as just relating to other people, I think that this generation is still one that likes to sit down and talk. So I think that might be welcomed. That's one thing I love about engaging with our clients and the people we work with, is because you sit down, they're not looking at their cell phone when they're talking to you typically. Right. Especially the 70 and older, and you just talk about family and life. So it's a different kind of connection versus, I think, in 10 years, people might not want you to knock on their door and offer them a meal, or it might be they might prefer a text message or a Facebook message of some kind. But I think I think taking the time to really talk to people and listen to them is something that's undervalued, but certainly appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think that's something that would help all of us go a long ways, even with neighbors our same age.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. There's still that tendency to, too many distractions. And I do recognize that with my neighbors, is when I do sit with them, they're not distracted.
No.
They just want to sit and chat for a while. And when you're distracted, sometimes it's like, well, hey, it was good talking to you. You need to go home and deal with your kids now, because you're not, you're not here. You're not present. You're not listening. So I think that's great advice. That's a really good observation. Is there anything else kind of dealing with vulnerable adults or the elderly population that we haven't talked about that goes on at Elder Law that you would want to talk about?
We work with a lot of a wide range of needs, like I mentioned, and we work to help people solve problems and meet basic needs. So we do that through a team with a wide range of skills: lawyers, social workers, housing counselors, volunteers, like I mentioned, who help everywhere from stuffing envelopes to speaking to legislators to advocate for seniors. So I think there's no task too big or too small, and we have a good team. But at the end of the day, regardless of anyone's specialty, it's really working to promote that mission, which is just solving problems and making ends meet.
Yeah, certainly.
As simple as that.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of ultimately that's the goal of all of us, is solving the problems and making ends meet, making sure at the end of the day things work out for us. Can you kind of just take a couple minutes and talk about, I know that Elder Law kind of has individual programs that you work with, and without spending a lot of time on it, what are kind of some of the specific areas where you do have very specific programs that Elder Law works on?
Sure. The one that's been around the longest, our first program was the Legal Hotline for Michigan seniors. That's free advice for people over 60. There is an age-specific, no income limit. We can talk to family members or caregivers as well, people over 60. Longest running legal hotline in the nation, actually. We also do a lot of work on our Mid-America Pension Rights Project, which is help finding lost pensions or any issues around retirement. We also have a benefits option and enrollment center, and I mentioned earlier for people aging into poverty, not sure where to look for help. We provide screenings through this program to give people benefits they are likely eligible for, things like food and medical assistance, utility assistance, prescription drug coverage, housing, so we can give them kind of a roadmap of where to start and tell them how we can help them with those programs. We have Michigan's Coordinated Access to Food for the Elderly, which helps older adults 60 and over apply for state of Michigan benefits. Our main mission is food in that program, but certainly we can help someone apply for any benefit. So those are just a few of our specific programs, all housed at Elder Law of Michigan.
Yeah, sure. So it's not just you don't just kind of farm out the work to local agencies. There's also a great deal of work you guys are doing over there. That's just that's incredible. Like I said, I'm a little overwhelmed just listening to all the stuff that goes on over there. Prevention Network does kind of very similar work with volunteers and professionals in the substance abuse prevention field. So I know, like the vast, the width of information that you have to have at your fingertips at a moment's notice when somebody calls and says, "Here's the issue. How do we work on it, or how do we help solve that?" Wow, it really is daunting to have to be able to think on 15 different levels at once. So Elder Law, it sounds like, just does a real smooth job of doing that. I also want to mention, kind of before we wrap up, Lindsay is going to be joining the Prevention Network Board, actually has already joined the Prevention Network Board. So I'm very excited, some of the stuff that she has said here today, as far as bringing a new perspective to our board on serving the elderly and making sure we're not forgetting about that population, as well as kind of other vulnerable adult populations. So I'm pretty excited about the partnerships that we could be building with Elder Law and some of the other groups you work with, working with Prevention Network over the years. So we're really excited to have you on board, and we're excited for, who knows whatever's coming next. So. All that being said, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you guys are just incredibly busy, so to take an hour and spend with us and educate us a little bit on Elder Law and your services, I really appreciate it. I wish you all just the best. The stuff that you're doing is just so important, and I agree, with what your founders thought 23 years ago, that, boy, if we can make life better for this population, it really will make our community a stronger place. So my hat's off to the work that you do, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
Discussion about the function and role of media and how we understand ourselves in the world, with the emphasis obviously on looking at how the alcohol industry in particular targets you. When we do youth-led media projects, there's several things we try to incorporate, and we did the same thing that we always do when we were working with students from Cassopolis just recently. So we try to incorporate sort of a media literacy component when we do production and discussion about the kind of counter-media campaign they're going to make, for a variety of reasons. First, because we think it's really important that they understand how media functions. So we give them the skills and kind of the literacy to be able to understand how media is constructed and what that means. Particularly around the alcohol and tobacco industry, because those industries target them in very sophisticated ways through a variety of media sources to kind of normalize the use of alcohol and tobacco in their lives. Once we give them those kinds of skills, then we help them kind of deconstruct the same kind of media so they understand those building blocks, so they can kind of analyze and realize the ways they're being targeted and influenced by those kind of powerful messages that the industry will spend sometimes billions of dollars on an annual basis trying to build a greater consumer market. Once we give them that kind of skill, then we kind of get them to think about, in their own media production, the pieces that they're going to produce, how they can kind of keep those concepts in mind so they can sort of do the exact same that the media industry does, but sort of flip it around and try to use the same techniques to sort of normalize positive behaviors and influence the ways so that they themselves and other students can make good decisions. It's always interesting to see the kind of reactions that we get from students when they go through the exercises and when they themselves engage in the deconstruction, because they always come up with answers that are very interesting and wide-ranging in terms of how they see the world differently now that they've been sort of exposed to this kind of tool.
I think that the media training is very useful because I didn't realize when I came here, I didn't realize that they distorted girls' faces as much to make them more beautiful, and that can affect the way that we live because it can make us seem like we have to be perfect, and we don't have to be perfect. We're all different and nobody's going to be the perfect person.
Just weeks before the holidays, it's hard not to notice all the seasonal commercials, using a variety of approaches to sell products and lifestyles. In this Overstock.com commercial, they use a very stylized approach with the red and white colors of their logo, and the main character sings a song using traditional Christmas melodies.
Overstock.com. Buy online, saves you time, gifts for dad and mom.
In this Target commercial, we see a family opening presents on Christmas morning, and the mother opens up a flat-screen TV. She thanks Santa for her present, but her husband then raises concerns over the spending and even mentions the country is experiencing a recession. The wife ignores his comments as Target reminds us that they offer surprisingly great prices. Another commercial begins with a series of scenes with children showing all kinds of excitement over the presents they receive on Christmas morning. Then the commercial transitions to an adult driving a new car, with the narrator saying, "Find your perfect gift." The ad wants us as adults to experience the joy of holiday gifts by going out and buying ourselves a new car. All these commercials are trying to tap into our own holiday memories, with music, scenery, and childhood experiences. However, what these ads often end up doing is affirming this belief that we are what we buy, and that gift giving is what really brings us happiness.
I forgot we're in a recession.
Well, maybe Santa was a little thriftier than you think.
To take a cue from the husband who's concerned about the recession, we need to question the wisdom of equating consumption with happiness. To explore this theme, we encourage you to check out the book Born to Buy by Juliet Shore, and the MEF documentary, The Overspent American, Why We Want What We Don't Need.
I thought the media training was interesting. It was very informational. It's crazy to think that beer companies are, targeting us from, less than 5 years old, and they're trying to brand their company's name into our heads our entire lives, so that when we do turn 21, that's all we, when we go out, we want to buy a Budweiser or a Coors, because that's what we've heard all our lives.
So much passion.
Have a nice book club. I'll beat the game.
I'd like to think so, though.
Oh, here we go.
This Budweiser commercial first appeared during this year's Super Bowl, with the context being that there are a group of women involved in a book club. The guy who lives in the house where the book club is happening decides to stay once he sees that there's a bucket of Bud Light. He doesn't ask to participate, he just invites himself, and then begins to belittle the intellectual exercise that the women are engaged in. When one woman describes the storyline of the books as two women thrust together by war, the man picks up on the word thrusting and sexualizes it. Then he takes the book out of one woman's hand, looks at another woman, and says he'd like to hear her read some words, again suggesting something sexual. Budweiser then brings up their tagline, that is, "This is a sure sign of good times when Budweiser is involved."
Sure sign of good times. It's just right taste of Bud Light. Here we go. Here we go.
So then do you like Little Women?
Yeah, I'm not too picky.
At the end of the spot, another woman asks if he likes the book Little Women, and his response is that he doesn't too picky, since he thinks she's referring to the size of women and not the title of a book. On the surface, one could argue that this is just about a pushy guy who doesn't care about intellectual inquiry, just drinking beer with a bunch of women. In fact, the ad normalizes male privilege, which means the guy can feel comfortable doing whatever he wants with no consequences. However, the ad also demeans women by showing them somewhat powerless and mentally disarmed by this guy who is primarily motivated by beer. Of course, the ad has to use 4 women who are young and attractive, which also underscores cultural stereotypes about women. For more information on the use of these kinds of gender stereotypes in alcohol ads, check out the documentary Spin the Bottle, Sex, Lies, and Alcohol by the Media Education Foundation.
I learned in media trading today that the companies of drugs and alcohol try to get us to think it's fun. It's something all kids, cool kids can do, but it's really not. It affects us badly and it changes our life negatively.
Cut! What's that doing on my set? Product placement, sir.
In the past, Budweiser has been one of the main products advertised during the Super Bowl, and this year was no different. The most branded beer company ran several new spots during the big game, with the first one being this ad, which makes fun of the use of product placement in films. We see a Budweiser ad on a pinball game in the background, part of a stained glass window, neon lights above the door, bar lights. One of the characters uses a bottle of Bud as a weapon, and even a Bud Light truck drives into the scene. Of course, some of these examples are exaggerations, but in many ways, the Bud Light spot is accurate. Product placement is rampant in most Hollywood films, and Budweiser pays for the opportunity to be featured in films.
More Bud Light?
In Wolverine X-Men Origins, a bottle of Bud is held with the label out.
One of you has got to shoot the poop. That's you, babe. That's you.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
In a remake of Friday the 13th, college-age students play a drinking game with Budweiser.
Shoot the poop! Shoot the poop! Shoot the poop! Fuck that, I'm not drinking out of your sweaty.
And in the most recent Star Trek film, we hear one of the main characters order Budweiser in a bar.
3 Budweiser Classics, 2 Cardassian Sunrises, and
Try the slush, it's good. According to the website Brand Channel, Budweiser appeared as a product placement in 5 2010 films: Kick-Ass, Jackass 3, Dear John, The Town, and Paranormal Activity 2. Already in 2011, the Budweiser brand has appeared in the film No Strings Attached. Budweiser is the most branded beer in the U.S., which is one of the reasons why it's the highest selling beer. Buying their way into films makes complete sense, not only because it is part of their overall branding strategy, but because you can't avoid product placement in films. Product placement also normalizes consumption, and in the case of Budweiser, it further normalizes the use of their brand of beer. For more information on product placement in films, check out the documentary Behind the Screens. And for our listing of product placement in films by year or by product, go to brandchannel.com.
I like the media training. It also opened my eyes more to where how advertisers are targeting young people, showing how it was well, you can do this when you get older and everything. So it just really kind of showed me what's going on.
Beer and sporting events seem to go together, especially in the advertising world. Coors is a big sponsor of professional football and promotes itself as the official beer of NASCAR racing. So it is no surprise that this new Coors commercial uses the setting of baseball to promote their product. This ad is primarily about male fantasy. When touching the glass of Coors Light, each of the 3 men sees a vision. One is downhill skiing, another is in a bar, and the third guy sees a beautiful woman who throws him a kiss and leaves him with a can of Coors beer. The first 2 guys also see this last male fantasy and quickly request a Coors Light as well. After the company inserts its tagline, the male fantasy continues when a woman in the stands throws a kiss to the same guy who was kissed by a woman in his vision. Because as we all know, strange women are always throwing kisses to men in public places. What seems like a commercial that is selling beer is really a commercial that is normalizing male fantasy and male privilege. This is not anything new for the Coors Brewing Company. Through their financial support, Joseph Coors and other family members have bankrolled a right-wing agenda of union busting, homophobia, sexism, racism, and covert operations, including funding the brutal Contra forces in Nicaragua in the 1980s. Because Coors has supported right-wing campaigns, there have been organized boycotts of Coors beer for years, sometimes led by organized labor, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered community, and more recently the civil rights group BAM, since Coors funded the campaign in Michigan to get rid of affirmative action in 2006. For more information on Coors, see Russ Ballant's book, The Coors Connection, or go to the website of BAM.com.
The media training has helped us view things in a way that we're not quite aware of, and that sometimes the media tries to trick us and influence us to make bad decisions. But we have to learn that the media is not always on our side and that we have to stand up for what's right.
This new commercial from Jim Beam has a guy making out on the couch, even though he has a girlfriend. The other woman asks if it is safe to make out, and the guy says that his girlfriend is out of town, or so he thought. It's bad enough that the makers of Jim Beam use as a context for their alcohol the idea that it is okay to cheat in relationships, but this ad goes one step further by having the girlfriend suggest that they have a threesome. One of the major male fantasy themes that has been normalized in mainstream culture is for a man to be with two women, a theme that is explored in a recent book by Gail Dennis called Pornland: How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality. The male fantasy is taken one step further since the girlfriend is the one who initiates the idea of a threesome. Jim Beam celebrates that reality by saying, "the girlfriend," and then has the audacity to end their ad telling us all to drink smart. In fact, the Drink Smart website is just another marketing tool of the Jim Beam company that tries to paint themselves as a responsible company. It is interesting to note that in the core principles of their marketing code, it states that they seek to, quote, maintain social and ethical standards with respect to gender and cultural differences among targeted consumers. The question to ask here is, how does a man having sex with two women respect gender? For more information on the use of sex in alcohol advertising, check out the documentary Spin the Bottle, produced by the Media Education Foundation.
The media training really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that I wasn't aware of, like in media, that there's a lot of fake stuff and that I'm not going to believe that in the future, not trust that.
If we are to remain leaders in the green economy, then we have to be relentless in our pursuit of clean energy. We have to constantly evaluate all aspects of our energy footprint, find opportunities to collaborate and partner with other companies and organizations. And as one of Nike's long-held business maxims so aptly declares, never stop evolving, especially when it involves doing the right thing. This statement is from Nike's Sarah Severin, the director of Nike's shareholder mobilization, and was issued on August 17th of this year. It's an interesting statement in light of a recent ad that Nike ran in conjunction with the University of West Virginia's football team, since the university has a contract to wear Nike gear. The ad, as you can see, has as a background an image of a mountaintop mining, a practice of mining coal that is devastating much of the Appalachian Mountains. The ad was intended, according to Nike, as a tribute to the hardworking people of the Mountain State, as well as the fallen miners in the Upper Big Branch disaster last April. However, the deceased miners do not appear in the ad, just an image of the mined mountaintop. To add insult to injury, Nike then said that, just like the miners, the West Virginia football players put their lives on the line every day. Before making such claims, Nike should pay more attention to local data. According to a West Virginia University study, they found that coal mining costs Appalachians 5 times more in early deaths as the industry provides to the region in jobs, taxes, and other economic benefits. Because of the attention that mountaintop mining has received and the exposure of Nike's ad campaign, there's been a lot of public pressure put on the company. And because of that public pressure, Nike changed its ad on September 3, just before the college football season started. For more information on this issue, check out a recent article by Jeff Biggers, author of numerous books on the negative impact of coal mining, such as The United States of Appalachia.
Morning in the media training, I learned a lot about how commercials can influence people. They can train your mind to be able to recognize even just a letter of a brand, and it was very informative.